Hey everybody, Katie Pavlich here. If you know me at all, I don't usually put out videos like this because although I'm a millennial, I am a boomer at heart. But given the horrific events of the past week, I think it's more important than ever if we have knowledge or information that we can share to help people understand what has happened, that we have an obligation to share it. So here we go. The number one question that I have been asking, and I'm sure that many people watching have been asking over the course of the past 72 hours is, why? How could this have happened to someone like Charlie Kirk, a 31-year-old father of two, devoted husband, devoted Christian, an American patriot, with so much promise ahead of him? Someone who just wanted to have conversations and debate and to talk about issues that affect all of us on various different levels. And we got confirmation on Friday when the governor of Utah announced the details of the arrest of the man who pulled the trigger to end Charlie Kirk's life. President Trump announced that they had arrested him during an interview with Fox and Friends on Friday morning, and there was a press conference held shortly afterward. And the governor, Spencer Cox, came out and explained that Charlie Kirk was targeted for his political beliefs.
Robinson, who stated that Robinson had become more political in recent years. The family member referenced a recent incident in which Robinson came to dinner prior to September 10th, and in the conversation with another family member, Robinson mentioned Charlie Kirk was coming to UVU. They talked about why they didn't like him and the viewpoints that he had. The family member also stated Kirk was full of hate and spreading hate.
Now, there's obviously the situation with the killer, who reportedly told his family members that he did this and was turned in by his father. There's also the other issue that we're facing here, and that is the thousands, hundreds of thousands of people online celebrating this. And the question again is why? How could this happen? Why did this happen? Why are so many people gleefully celebrating the death of this young man? And Charlie Kirk was, and we will still, his legacy will to be foreseen as the years go on and we remember and see the fruits of all of his labor. But he was friends with the President of the United States. He knew prime ministers and ambassadors and foreign leaders from all over the world because of his work and his influence. But the place where Charlie Kirk thrived was on college campuses with students, understanding that that was the place where young people were being taught to hate their country, that America was irredeemable, about this venomous idea that capitalism and the free market were not ways of producing an economy that gave everybody an opportunity to make the most of themselves. They are crawling with anti-American sentiment. And he understood that these campuses were fomenting a revolution against the United States of America. So he went in and he talked to students there. And he started this almost 15 years ago doing this, and it ended on Wednesday. But in terms of understanding why there are so many people who are happy about this, you have to understand the ideology that he was combating when he went into these college campuses. So many, many years ago, I was doing research for a book, and I traveled to Chicago to go to the National Organization of Women Conference, which is a far-left feminist organization that's been around for many, many decades. And Chicago is ground zero for the communist Marxist movements in America. And the literature, I mean, the people there were pretty predictable, but the literature that I found there was the most informative about this ideology and the way that these people think about America and the systems that they are constantly working to tear down. So for example, here is a book called Feminism and the Marxist Movement. So Charlie Kirk was so effective that he was able to change the minds of young people to switch from not just Democrat to Republican, but from progressive liberal to conservative in terms of family values, faith, how you feel about your country. And this is important for the why this happened. So this movement is dedicated to destroying those values, the very values that Charlie Kirk not only held himself and lived through, but that he was instilling in young people. So since the 1960s and 70s, this Marxist communist movement in America has used college campuses for their own revolution. And we see that in this literature and what they're talking about. So first, let's talk about their ideology. And I'll say one more thing. Charlie was not only convincing young men to return to marriage, traditional values, he was also convincing young women. And at the time I was writing a book about women. And so this literature is a lot about the way they were trying to reshape the traditional family in America in favor of this ideology. So let's just get into it. So let's dive into some of what this literature says and what this ideology believes. I have piles of books of research, so I'm going to try and keep this short. You can get a little taste of what this is, but you can certainly find a lot of this stuff and do your own research if you want more, and I encourage you to look for more. So on the family, which is like a key target of this ideology, they say Marxism explained the role of the family within class society and the function of the family in perpetuating the oppression of women. Where have you heard that family is oppressive to women? You've heard that from professors on college campuses in culture, that you don't want a family. Family is oppressive, despite all the evidence showing that marriage has been wonderful for women and actually keeps them in a more financially stable, safer place throughout their lifetime. But that's a whole other topic. So they see the family as oppressive for women. Karl Marx, where all this ideology and material is sourced, has similar views on family. He says, in fact, abolition of the family is necessary. He says, on what foundation is the present family, the bourgeois family, based? And he uses bourgeois as a pejorative, meaning bourgeois means middle or upper class. And they believe, he's making the argument here that the family is inequitable, that it's not fair for people to have families because it makes them too wealthy and others are oppressed, and therefore you shouldn't have a family and be more privileged than others in society. And that they wanted to destroy the family. It says the bourgeois family will vanish as a matter of course. From that, everybody should read this so they understand communism and Marxism. And finally, I want to get into the revolutionaries who have carried out this ideology on college campuses and across the country. So this is a copy of a political book, a guideline, basically, a handbook called Prairie Fire, The Politics of Revolutionary Anti-Imperialism. And it's a copy because there were only 1,000 of these books ever published. It says this is one of 1,000 copies reprinted in Boston. And if you'll note, it's clearly coming from a room on a college campus. Which one, I'm not exactly sure. Anyway, this was published in the 1970s by the Weather Underground, which is a domestic terrorist organization that bombed a number of sites, set off a number of bombs in the 1970s. Bill Ayers, who of course went on to be a professor at the University of Illinois for years, he's retired now, was a heavy hitter and founder of the Weather Underground. And he also launched Barack Obama's political career in his living room in Chicago. Again, back to Chicago being ground zero for all this communist Marxist ideology in America. So what is Prairie Fire all about? I'm going to read from this so you can understand what their goals were. He said, our movement urgently needs a concrete analysis of the particular conditions of our time and place. We need strategy. We need to battle for a correct ideology and win people over. In this way, we create the conditions for the development of a successful revolutionary movement and party. We need a revolutionary communist party in order to lead the struggle, give coherence and direction to the fight, seize power, and build a new society. Getting from here to there is a process of coming together in a disciplined way around ideology and strategy, developing an analysis of our real conditions, mobilizing a base among the U.S. people, building principled relationships to the third world struggle, and accumulating practice and struggle against U.S. imperialism. Prairie Fire is written to communist-minded people, independent organizers, and anti-imperialists, those who carry the traditions and lessons of the struggles of the last decade, and those who join in the struggles of today. Prairie Fire is written to all sisters and brothers who are engaged in armed struggle against the enemy. It is written to prisoners, women's groups, collectives, study groups, workers' organizing committees, communes, GI organizers, conscience-raising groups, veterans, community groups, and revolutionaries of all kinds. To all who will read and criticize and bring its content to life in practice. It is written as an argument against those who oppose action and hold back the struggle. And finally, Prairie Fire is based on a belief that the duty of a revolutionary is to make the revolution. This is not an abstraction. It means that the revolutionaries must make a profound commitment to the future of humanity, apply our limited knowledge and experience to understand an ever-changing situation, organize the masses of people, and build the fight. It means that struggle and risk and hard work and adversity will become a way of life, that the only certainty will be constant change, that the only possibilities are victory or death. So if you notice the line where they say, organize the masses of people and build the fight, this gives you a little bit of an insight into the masses of people on the internet, around the country, who are celebrating the horrific assassination of Charlie Kirk. Because they've been mobilized. They've been revolutionized. They've been part of this project that was set up in the 1970s by these radical domestic terrorists who suffered no consequences for what they did to get there. We're seeing, they talk about here, targeting government and groups and collectives. What are we seeing now? We're seeing people in the U.S. Navy, the U.S. Army, the Coast Guard, the Air Force, the Secret Service, expressing that Charlie Kirk deserved this. This ideology has infiltrated our institutions, the institutions we're supposed to be able to trust, and it's not without organizing and design. It is precisely by design. If you keep going into this book, you'll find, Che Guevara, a revolutionary who killed thousands of people who didn't think the same way that they did. There's a letter in here from Fidel Castro about the struggle, which is really a reflection on this idea now that if you don't want to give in to any kind of leftist ideology, you are committing violence, and therefore violence will be committed against you. It's all in here. So if you're struggling with why this happened, how could this happen, I'm hoping that this information gives you a better idea of the ideology that Charlie Kirk was fighting. And not only was he fighting it, and this is the most important part, he was reversing the revolution. He was changing young people's minds away from this, away from the power. He was taking away their power to indoctrinate students on campus to then go into our institutions, into the media, into the government, into healthcare, into social work, into law enforcement. And that could not stand. That's why they killed him. And that's why you're seeing so many people who agree with this ideology, who are these people, celebrating. On with this. Part of the bigger picture here is that this is a clash of civilizations and cultures. One of the Judeo-Christian Western values that Charlie spent his life and his life's work defending to the point that he was assassinated over it, against the forces that want to tear it down. And more specifically, the American principle of free speech and the importance of upholding it.